What if I told you that there are beings that should not exist? Creatures that challenge the divine order and walked over the earth, provoking the wrath of the Creator himself? It looks like fiction film plot, but it is on the pages of the Bible. Have you heard of the Nephilim? These mysterious giants appear in Genesis 6 and are the center of one of the most controversial passages in Scripture. What really happened before the flood? Who were the children of God who joined the daughters of man? Would we be facing a dark attempt at genetic corruption to prevent Messiah's lineage? Throughout this study, we will explore amazing accounts of the fallen angels, Lucifer's rebellion, and how all this connects with future events described in Revelation 12. The truth is that pride and excessive ambition have always been the root of the fall for both angels and men. While Lucifer sought to exalt himself above God, Noah found grace for his humility and obedience. And this lesson echoes to this day. Those who try to rise to force end up falling, while those who humble themselves are exalted. This theme can change the way you see the history of humanity and supernatural. Get ready to dive into an intriguing and revealing narrative that not only challenges beliefs, but also brings practical applications to your life. In the end, a question will remain: will you choose a path of self-promotion or humility? Now, let's unravel this mystery together. When we talk about the Nephilim, we enter one of the most intriguing mysteries of the Bible. Genesis 6:14 mentions that the children of God took the daughters of men, and from this union were born powerful giants. But who were these children of God? There are three main theories. Some believe they were fallen angels, others who were powerful rulers, and some argue that they were descendants of seven mixed with those of Cain. In any case, the result was so terrible that it led God to decree the flood. The most accepted theory suggests that the children of God were, in fact, fallen angels who transgress a divine order by relate to human. The result? The creation of the Nephilim, giants that spread violence across the earth. This genetic corruption may have been a Satan's strategy to prevent the Messiah from coming, corrupting human lineage. This idea finds support in Judas 6, which talks about angels that did not keep their original state. If it were just a common miscegenation among peoples, why would God have judged this with such severity? The impact of the Nephilim was so destructive that God intervened with a drastic judgment, the flood. While the earth was full of sin and corruption, Noah was found fair and righteous in his generation. The word righteous here may suggest not only moral justice, but also genetic purity, an essential factor for preservation of humanity without the contamination of the giants. Divine judgment came as a reset, eliminating the aberrations and restoring the order created by God. Interestingly, there is evidence that the giants appeared again after the flood, as we see in the history of Goliath and the giants of Canaan. That raises the question, did the fallen angels try again? Or did Nephilim line remnants survive in some way? The fact is that the battle between God's plan and Satan's onslaught continues throughout history, and the echoes of this war come to this day. If this attempt at corruption of humanity occurred in the past, could something similar happen in the future? Jesus himself warned that the last days will be like Noah's days. This leads us to reflect, what exactly does that mean to us today? Before becoming the enemy of God and humanity, Satan was known as Lucifer, a being of indescribable beauty and power. In Ezekiel 28, his description is impressive: an anointed cherub, adorned with precious stones, perfect in his ways and creation. Already in Isaiah 14, we see the real problem that led to its fall: pride. He wished to raise his throne above the stars of God, rule the heavens, and be worshipped as the Creator himself. But his uncontrolled ambition led him to ruin. Lucifer's story shows us that rebellion against God always has consequences. He didn't fall alone. Revelation 12:4 mentions that a third of the angels was dragged with him. This means that millions of heavenly beings turned against God, seduced by the promise of autonomy and power. What they did not realize was that they were exchanging the glory of heaven for a destiny of darkness and condemnation. This same strategy of seduction and deception is still used to ward off people from the truth, with his expulsion from heaven. Satan has not lost his position only, but also his original purpose. Instead of serving God, he began to oppose his kingdom. He created an empire of lies and deceit, trying to distort all that is good and holy. He is called the prince of this world, not because he has legitimate authority, but because he has managed to deceive and influence many. Since the Garden of Eden, Its mission has been to rule out humanity from truth and lead it to destruction. What makes this story even more tragic is that Lucifer could have chosen a different way. God did not create evil, but allowed angels and men to have free will. And here is a great lesson: the same pride that led Lucifer to the fall can lead to anyone to failure. When we seek to exalt ourselves, when we believe we can live without God, we are walking a dangerous path. This is the essence of the rebellion. But if pride was the cause of Lucifer's fall, then what's the solution to us? There's an opposite path, a path that does not lead to ruin, but to true exaltation. In the next topic, let's see how humility not only protects against the fall, but also aligns us with God's own heart. From the beginning, the first sin of the universe was not disobedience, but pride. It was this feeling that made Lucifer want something that did not belong to him, the position of God. Isaiah 14:12-15 shows how he declared in his heart, "I will climb to heaven. I will exalt my throne above the stars of God. I will be similar to the Most High." But instead of glory, he found ruin. This pattern would later be repeated in Eden, when the serpent tried Eve with a promise that she could be like God. Lucifer's rebellion not only turned him away from God, but also became the seed of all sin. The essence of pride is to believe that we do not need God. Since then, this has been the greatest spiritual trap. The world encourages self-promotion, incessant search for recognition and power. But does this mindset not exactly reflect the path that led to the fall of the anointed cherub? Like him, many people live to build their own kingdoms without realizing that they are walking a dangerous destination. This principle applies in a practical way in everyday life. How many times do we make decisions motivated by the ego? When we want to be right at any cost, when we resist admitting errors, when we seek recognition above all this are manifestations of the same pride that ruined Satan. Deep down, the rebellion against God does not need to be explicit. Just live as if it were not necessary. And this is exactly the mistake that the enemy wants to spread. The Bible repeatedly warns against the dangers of pride and rebellion. Proverbs 16:18 says, "Pride precedes destruction, and arrogance precedes the fall." If we analyze the great tragedies of humanity, we will realize that many started with leaders who were untouchable, unable to make mistakes. The same is true at small scales. Relationships are destroyed, opportunities are lost, simply because someone did not want to humiliate and recognize the truth. But if pride leads to fall, there is an opposite path. Jesus showed that humility is the key to true exaltation. While Satan sought to rise and was overthrown, Christ chose to descend and was exalted above all. In the next topic, we'll see how he left us a perfect example of surrender, service, and true greatness. The contrast between Jesus and Lucifer could not be clearer. While Lucifer sought to exalt himself and was eventually thrown back to the abyss, Jesus, being God himself, chose to humble himself to fulfill the mission of saving humanity. In Philippians 2:5-11, Paul teaches us that Jesus, though God, did not cling to his heavenly position, but became a man, becoming a servant. He did not use his authority to be served, but to serve. He did not come to dominate, but to love and redeem. The humility of Jesus is a powerful example for all of us. Instead of seeking self-promotion, he surrendered completely to God's will. He did not come to be exalted by men, but to sacrifice himself on the cross. Jesus' humility, unlike Lucifer's self-sufficiency and pride, is the model of true greatness. He shows us that the true way to spiritual exaltation is not to rise, but to descend. God himself humbled himself to teach us that true strength is in surrender. This concept goes against everything the world teaches. In today's society, where the search for its own glory is exalted, the message of Jesus is radical. He who humbles himself will be exalted, Matthew 23:12. This is a call to all who seek to grow spiritually and live according to God's will. When we give up our personal ambitions and put ourselves to others, we make room for God to raise us at the right time. And when we do this, we are in tune with what Jesus taught and lived. Self-promotion may seem tempting, but it is full of traps. True spiritual exaltation comes through humility, to recognize that we are nothing without God. When Jesus was crucified, he was elevated to a position of honor that no human being could conquer. He was exalted above all name, Philippians 2:9, and through his humility, he brought salvation to the world, just as Lucifer lost everything when he tried to exalt himself. Jesus conquered everything by humiliating himself. In a world that constantly encourages us to fight for first place, true victory lies in following Christ's example, living a life of humility and service. In the end, it is this stance that prepares us to be exalted in the time and divine purpose. The story of Lucifer in Jesus teaches us that the ways of God are completely different from the ways of the world. True glory is to serve and humble itself, not to seek recognition. Now, I will go to the next topic. As we have already worked all points, can I consider the content full, or is there any other adjustments you would like to make in some topic? Now that we deeply explore the fall of Lucifer, the origin of pride and rebellion, and the perfect example of humility offered by Jesus, it is time to reflect on what it means to us today. The struggle between humility and pride is not just a distant story, it is reflected in our lives every day. The question is, which path have you chosen? Are you seeking exaltation through your own strength? Or are you ready to humble yourself and trust that God will exalt at the right time? Jesus showed that true greatness does not come from what we can achieve alone, but how much we are willing to submit to God's purpose. While the world insists that we must fight for our own throne, the Bible teaches us that true power comes from humility. By following Christ's example, you not only find an eternal purpose, but you also align with the divine plan for your life. The choice is yours. Do you want to be exalted by the world or honored by God? Now I invite you to reflect on how you can apply this humility in your daily life. Where are there times when you can choose to serve instead of being served? How can you put aside pride and recognize that your true strength comes from God? These small adjustments can transform your life and spiritual walk. If this content has touched your heart, subscribe to the channel and enable notifications to continue following more revelations like these. Remember, true exaltation comes from humility, and this is a lesson we all need to learn every day.